In late February 2026, tension begins building once again across the waters of the Persian Gulf. For decades, this narrow region has been one of the most volatile maritime corridors on Earth. At the center of it all lies the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passageway through which nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply must travel. And once again, tensions are rising. Iranian patrol boats begin shadowing commercial tankers. Surveillance drones appear uncomfortably close to foreign warships. Radio warnings grow sharper. Encounters grow more frequent. The situation is tense, but not unusual. What makes this moment different is the presence of the United States Fifth Fleet. Destroyers patrol the shipping lanes. Carrier strike groups operate just beyond the horizon. Beneath the surface, submarines quietly track every movement across the Gulf. Their mission is simple: maintain freedom of navigation, deter escalation, and be ready if deterrence fails. But Iranian forces continue pushing the limits. Fast boats from the Revolutionary Guard move dangerously close to U.S. vessels. Radar locks appear briefly on naval sensors before disappearing again. Reconnaissance drones begin circling overhead. Warnings are issued, some are ignored, and eventually the calculus begins to change. Behind the scenes, planners at United States Central Command begin examining options for a rapid, targeted strike operation, one designed to neutralize key naval assets before they could threaten shipping in the region. The concept is simple. If conflict erupts, disable the platforms capable of launching attacks. Among those platforms sits one ship in particular. At the Iranian port of Chabahar, on the edge of the Gulf of Oman, intelligence satellites identify a high-value target tied quietly to the pier. The frigate IRIS Jamaran. At just over 1,500 tons, Jamaran is not a large warship by global standards. But for Iran's navy, it represents something far more important. It is one of the country's first domestically produced guided missile frigates, a symbol of naval independence and technological progress. The ship carries anti-ship missiles, naval guns, air defense systems, and a helicopter deck capable of supporting maritime patrol operations. In regional terms, it is a serious platform, and that makes it a priority target. Satellite imagery shows the vessel moored alongside the pier. Engines inactive. Routine harbor operations continue around it. From a tactical perspective, it is a rare moment of vulnerability. If a strike were launched now, the ship would have little chance to react. So contingency plans begin to form. Far out at sea, guided missile destroyers quietly adjust their patrol patterns. Beneath the surface, submarines shift position. Weapon systems move to standby status. Everything happens slowly, quietly, deliberately. By 0400 local time, the pieces are in place. Launch crews stand ready aboard destroyers. Fire control systems calculate potential flight paths. Satellite links provide continuous targeting updates. Above the region, surveillance drones orbit silently in the dark. The surface of the Gulf remains calm. But underneath, tension has begun to coil. Iranian lookouts scan the horizon from their posts along the harbor. Radar operators track the normal clutter of maritime traffic. Nothing appears out of the ordinary. For the moment, everything looks routine. But hundreds of miles away, inside sealed launch tubes, long-range cruise missiles sit ready. And if the order were given, the first wave could arrive in less than 30 minutes. From destroyers and submarines positioned across the Arabian Sea, Tomahawk cruise missile systems would ignite and streak low across the water, navigating by satellite guidance and terrain mapping as they approach the Iranian coastline. Their target already selected, the harbor at Chabahar, and the warship tied quietly to the pier. Inside the harbor, the crew of Jamaran would have little warning. Engines cold, crew resting, routine watch rotations continuing as normal. From the outside, it would appear to be just another quiet night at port. But if the strike began, that quiet would disappear in seconds. Because by the time radar operators realized what was approaching, the missiles would already be there. The missiles arrive without warning. For a moment, the harbor of Chabahar remains completely quiet. The dark water barely disturbed as the incoming cruise missiles skim just meters above the surface. Then the first impact hits. A Tomahawk slams into the pier beside the frigate IRIS Jamaran, detonating against the dock infrastructure and sending a shockwave racing across the harbor. Fuel lines rupture instantly. Storage tanks ignite, Within seconds, secondary explosions begin rippling outward through the naval facility. Fireballs climb into the night sky as ammunition bunkers detonate. Thick black smoke rises above the harbor, visible for miles across the Gulf of Oman. The Jamaran takes the next hits directly. Cruise missiles strike along the port side of the frigate, tearing open the hull and shredding sections of deck plating. The superstructure shudders under the blast, antennas collapsing as fragments of steel scatter across the pier. Inside the ship, alarms erupt. Crew members rush from their compartments toward the upper decks as emergency lights flash across the passageways. Damage control teams scramble to contain the fires spreading through the forward sections of the vessel. But the damage is already severe. Water pressure drops almost immediately. Fire pumps fail. Seawater begins flooding through multiple breaches along the hull as the frigate starts listing sharply to port. Below deck, the engine room fills rapidly. Turbines seize as seawater floods the machinery spaces, cutting power across the vessel. Lights flicker, then go dark. High above the harbor, surveillance drones from the United States Central Command orbit silently, transmitting thermal imagery back to command centers hundreds of miles away. On infrared cameras, the Jamaran glows white-hot against the dark water. Sections of the hull begin to buckle along the waterline. Metal plating tears apart under the pressure of internal explosions, sending debris raining into the harbor below. Oil spreads across the surface of the water, shimmering under the moonlight as flames reflect off the growing slick. No counterattack comes. Coastal defense batteries remain silent, their targeting systems disrupted by electronic warfare. Radar operators struggle to regain contact as guidance signals are jammed and spoofed. The strike is over almost as quickly as it began. In a matter of minutes, the frigate that once symbolized Iran's growing naval ambitions is reduced to a burning wreck, listing heavily as the bow rises and the stern sinks deeper into the harbor. From their command centers, analysts watch the destruction unfold in real time. Reports confirm the strike remained confined to the military facility. No civilian areas were struck, no collateral targets detected. But the message is unmistakable. The harbor burns through the night. Flames illuminate the coastline as smoke drifts inland across the city. Other vessels in port suffer heavy damage, their hulls torn open by nearby blasts as cranes collapse and storage buildings catch fire. For Iran's naval command, the shock is immediate. Their most visible frigate, gone in the opening moments of the strike. No dramatic battle at sea, no warning salvo. Just a sudden demonstration of precision firepower delivered in the darkness before dawn. As the fires continue to spread across the base, follow-on strikes move toward additional targets across the region. But the fate of the Jamaran has already been sealed. By the time the first light of morning reaches the harbor, the wreckage is still burning. A smoking reminder of how quickly naval power can vanish when caught unprepared. Iran's air defense network was built specifically to stop attacks like this. Along the coastline, short-range systems stand ready to intercept low-flying threats, while long-range missile batteries watch the skies for aircraft and incoming cruise missiles. Radar stations sweep the horizon, and electronic warfare units constantly monitor the electromagnetic spectrum for hostile signals. On paper, it is a layered defense. In reality, it is about to be tested. As the incoming cruise missiles close in on the coast, they remain almost invisible to most radar systems. Flying only meters above the surface of the water, they stay beneath the radar horizon until the final moments of their approach. By the time operators begin detecting irregular signals, the missiles are already inside the defensive perimeter. Electronic countermeasures begin disrupting Iranian frequencies. Radar screens flicker with interference. Decoy signals appear, pulling attention away from the real targets approaching the harbor. The first wave slips through. At the naval base in Chabahar, alarms suddenly erupt across the installation. Operators shout warnings. Defense crews rush to their stations, but the response comes too late. The first missile slams into the pier beside the frigate IRIS Jamaran, sending a powerful shockwave across the harbor. Concrete fractures under the blast. Fuel lines rupture instantly. Flames begin spreading across the dockside facilities as burning debris rains down into the water. The Jamaran lurches violently against its mooring lines. Crew members on deck are thrown off balance as officers shout urgent commands across the ship. Anti-aircraft guns begin firing blindly into the night sky, tracers streaking upward in desperate attempts to intercept the incoming missiles. But the attackers are already seconds away. The second wave strikes directly. Cruise missiles slam into the port side of the frigate, ripping open the hull and sending fragments of metal flying across the harbor. Deck plating buckles under the force of the explosions as seawater begins flooding into damaged compartments. The ship starts listing hard aboard. Below deck, generators fail as power systems overrun. Lights flicker briefly before going out across large sections of the vessel. Emergency lanterns illuminate smoke-filled corridors as sailors rush to contain spreading fires with handheld extinguishers. But the damage is spreading faster than the crew can respond. Ammunition stored in forward magazines begins cooking off under the intense heat. One detonation triggers another, sending powerful shockwaves through the interior of the ship. Turrets tear loose from their mounts. The helicopter deck collapses inward as structural supports fail. The once proud frigate begins tearing itself apart from within. High above the harbor, surveillance drones from United States Central Command circle silently in the darkness. Commanders within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard watch the footage in disbelief as their flagship disappears beneath the water. The collapse has taken less than 10 minutes. No counterstrike, no prolonged battle, just a rapid chain reaction that reduced a modern warship to wreckage before it ever left the pier. Across the harbor, the fires continue burning through the night, consuming what remains of the naval facility. For those watching the aftermath unfold, the destruction becomes something more than a tactical victory. It becomes a stark warning. In modern warfare, a single well-timed strike can trigger consequences far beyond the initial explosion. And in this case, the chain reaction has only just begun. Dawn breaks slowly over the waters of the Gulf of Oman. Smoke still rises from the damaged naval base at Chabahar, twisting upward in thick black columns that drift inland with the morning wind. The frigate IRIS Jamaran is no longer visible. Only a spreading oil slick and scattered debris mark the place where the ship once floated. Pieces of twisted steel drift slowly across the harbor alongside life jackets and fragments of shattered deck plating. Along the pier, the destruction is unmistakable. Craters scar the concrete where missiles struck during the night. Burned-out vehicles sit abandoned near the dockside warehouses. Repair cranes lean at strange angles where the blast waves twisted their frames. For the naval base, the damage will take months to repair. Commanders within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard watch the footage in disbelief as their flagship disappears beneath the water. The collapse has taken less than 10 minutes. No counterstrike, no prolonged battle, just a rapid chain reaction that reduced a modern warship to wreckage before it ever left the pier. Across the harbor, the fires continue burning through the night, consuming what remains of the naval facility. For those watching the aftermath unfold, the destruction becomes something more than a tactical victory. It becomes a stark warning. In modern warfare, a single well-timed strike can trigger consequences far beyond the initial explosion. And in this case, the chain reaction has only just begun. Dawn breaks slowly over the waters of the Gulf of Oman. Smoke still rises from the damaged naval base at Chabahar, twisting upward in thick black columns that drift inland with the morning wind. The frigate IRIS Jamaran is no longer visible. Only a spreading oil slick and scattered debris mark the place where the ship once floated. Pieces of twisted steel drift slowly across the harbor alongside life jackets and fragments of shattered deck plating. Along the pier, the destruction is unmistakable. Craters scar the concrete where missiles struck during the night. Burned-out vehicles sit abandoned near the dockside warehouses. Repair cranes lean at strange angles where the blast waves twisted their frames. For the naval base, the damage will take months to repair. Rescue boats begin arriving shortly after sunrise. Crews search the wreckage, pulling survivors from the water wherever they can find them. Some sailors cling to floating debris, while others drift motionless among the oil-streaked waves. Casualty numbers begin to emerge slowly. Dozens are reported dead. Many more are injured. Inside Iran, the first official reaction is denial. State media initially describes the event as fabricated propaganda, insisting that only minor damage occurred during what officials call a limited incident. But the images begin spreading almost immediately. Commercial satellites capture the burning harbor from orbit. Drone footage circulates across international news networks. Thermal imagery confirms the destruction of the vessel tied to the pier only hours earlier. Within a short time, it becomes impossible to conceal the scale of the damage. The Jamaran now rests on the seabed. Thousands of miles away in Washington, briefings begin inside command centers connected to United States Central Command. Officials describe the operation in restrained terms. A high-value naval target has been neutralized during defensive operations aimed at protecting shipping routes in the region. The emphasis remains on precision. According to early reports, the strike remained confined to military facilities. No civilian targets were hit, and no follow-on escalation is announced. But the implications are clear. For years, Iran had invested heavily in expanding its naval capabilities. Domestic shipbuilding programs, missile development, and new coastal defense systems were intended to strengthen its presence in the region. The destruction of the Jamaran represents a major setback to those ambitions. Around the world, the reaction unfolds quickly. Oil markets briefly spike as traders react to the news, but prices stabilize once it becomes clear that shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz remain open. Regional allies watch the situation closely. Governments across the Middle East issue cautious statements supporting freedom of navigation while urging restraint from all sides. Major powers monitor the event with equal attention. For defense analysts in capitals from Beijing to Moscow, the speed and precision of the strike offer a stark example of how modern naval warfare could unfold in the opening hours of conflict. Inside Iran, the political consequences begin to build. Senior commanders face difficult questions about how the attack penetrated the country's layered defenses so quickly. Investigations begin inside the naval command structure as officials attempt to determine where the system failed. Resources that once supported naval expansion are suddenly redirected toward recovery and reconstruction. Meanwhile, the ships of the United States Fifth Fleet continue their patrols across the region. Destroyers maintain watch over the shipping lanes. Carrier groups remain positioned beyond the horizon. Beneath the surface, submarines continue their quiet surveillance of the Gulf. The immediate crisis begins to fade, but the strategic message remains. Across the waters of the Gulf, the wreckage resting beneath the surface becomes a reminder of how quickly modern naval power can shift when conflict erupts. For now, the shipping lanes remain open. The region returns to its uneasy balance, watched closely by the fleets that continue to patrol these waters every day. And beneath the harbor at Chabahar, the remains of a once proud warship settle slowly into the seabed, a silent ending to a night that reshaped the balance of power across the Gulf.